When you cried as a child, were you comforted? Were you held so tightly that the world felt safe again? Were you gently asked, with absolute warmth in your parents' eyes, "What is wrong, my dear? What hurts inside you?" On the very opposite end of the spectrum, were you told that you were simply being too much? Were you met with rolled eyes, heavy sighs of frustration, or outright anger? Were you made to feel that your tears, the only language your fragile, developing nervous system had to communicate pain, were nothing but an annoying disruption, an inconvenient mess that needed to be cleaned up or locked away instantly? Look around you in the adult world. Look closely at the people who spend their entire lives living in the heavy, suffocating shadows of others. They are the ones who never voice an opinion, who melt into the background of corporate meetings, and who swallow their discomfort in relationships. Most people assume they do this because it is their nature. We label them as naturally quiet. We call them peaceful, passive, or born introverts. But modern clinical psychology tells us a far more devastating truth. They do not hide because they love the dark. They do it because a long, long time ago, in the formative, fragile years of their childhood, remaining completely and utterly invisible was not a personality choice. It was a survival mechanism. It was the only viable way to survive the unpredictable psychological weather of their own household. We all know what a narcissist is. You cannot scroll through the internet for 5 minutes without being flooded with warnings, articles, and videos about them. The world is highly educated on the red flags of toxic self-love, manipulation, and grandiosity. But almost no one talks about their psychological mirror image. No one speaks of the silent twin, the deep psychological shadow that narcissists do not just happen to meet, but actively, instinctively hunt down in the crowded rooms of society. In modern psychology, this phenomenon is not just characterized as low self-esteem or a lack of confidence. It is something far more structured, far more profound. It is a terrifying, highly engineered survival mechanism known to clinical science as echoism. Let us look at the polarity between these two forces. While a narcissist starves for praise, an echoist is utterly, deeply terrified of it. While a narcissist demands the spotlight, an echoist experiences a visceral wave of anxiety if the light shines on them even for a second. They do not just hide their needs from the world. They actively destroy their own identity just to maintain a fragile state of peace. They consciously and unconsciously strip away their desires, becoming a mere hollow echo of someone else's powerful voice, until eventually they are entirely drained inside. Today, on this journey, we are unlocking the dark, cold prison of the silenced mind. We are exploring the hidden hallways of human trauma and finding the key to liberation. To truly understand the terrifying, complex anatomy of a silenced mind, we cannot merely look at modern textbooks. We have to travel backward in time, thousands of years back, to the rich, allegorical landscape of ancient Greek mythology. We are all deeply familiar with the classic story of Narcissus, the strikingly beautiful youth who fell so deeply, dangerously in love with his own reflection that he could not look away. He sat by a clear pool of water, paralyzed by his own image, until he literally starved to death, staring at nothing but himself. This is the tragic blueprint from which we derive the modern term narcissist. But history and popular culture conveniently forgot the other half of that ancient tragedy. They forgot the entity that coexisted in that very same forest. The story of Echo. Echo was not a villain. She was a mountain nymph who possessed a breathtakingly beautiful voice. She could speak with wit, grace, and immense clarity. But after drawing the ire and anger of the gods, specifically Juno, she was cursed with a cruel, unimaginable punishment. Echo lost the ability to speak her own thoughts. She was entirely stripped of her own independent voice. The curse was designed with psychological malice. She was forced to only be able to repeat the last few words that someone else had just spoken. When Echo met Narcissus in the dense woods, she fell hopelessly, deeply in love. But she was trapped. She could never initiate a conversation. She could never declare her love, nor express her inner worldview. She could only wait for him to speak, and then mirror his self-obsessed words right back into his ears. Narcissus, inherently unable to love anyone but himself, grew utterly disgusted by her lack of independent identity. He mocked her, rejected her, and abandoned her in the forest. Broken-hearted, Echo fled into the deepest, darkest caves. She refused to eat, refused to see the light, fading away slowly until nothing was left of her physical body but a hollow, repetitive sound. Fast forward to the year 2018. Renowned psychoanalyst Donna Christina Savory highlighted a profound truth. This is not just an ancient myth to be read in storybooks. This is the exact, undeniable blueprint of a hidden psychological prison that millions of adults inhabit today. It is a modern, existential prison where you do not speak your life. You merely repeat, absorb, and mirror the demands, moods, and voices of the world around you. How does this happen? How does a vibrant, healthy human being turn into an echo? Harvard Medical School psychologist Dr. Craig Malkin discovered through extensive clinical research that absolutely no one is born an echoist. It is not an inherent trait coded into your DNA. Echoism is an engineered survival mechanism. It is a brilliant, albeit devastating, adaptation that almost always begins in a childhood household governed by a volatile, highly sensitive, or deeply narcissistic parent. Let us lean in and imagine this household. Imagine a young child growing up in a home where the emotional atmosphere changes unpredictably. Like a violent summer thunderstorm, there is no emotional stability. If the child enters the room feeling sad or hurt, the narcissistic parent does not offer comfort. Instead, they explode in anger, shouting, "How dare you be miserable when I work so hard for this family?" If the child attempts to voice an independent opinion or setting a small boundary, the parent immediately dissolves into theatrical tears, playing the victim and accusing the child of being deeply ungrateful, malicious, or cold-hearted. In this toxic environment, the child's brilliant adaptive brain quickly processes the data and learns a highly dangerous, inverted lesson. My needs cause utter destruction. My voice causes chaos. Having an opinion or space makes the people I depend on for survival disappear or fall apart. To stay physically and emotionally safe, and to preserve whatever fragile relationship they can with the volatile parent, the child develops what clinical psychology formally calls the silenced response. They consciously learn to shrink their presence. They master the art of becoming completely, beautifully invisible. They actively push down their thoughts, bury their natural anger, and systematically suffocate their own desires. They realize with profound clarity that the only way to be safely loved in this house is to have no presence at all. But the tragedy does not stop when childhood ends. What happens when this invisible child blows out the candles on their 18th birthday, grows up, and steps out into the adult world? They do not leave the walls of that psychological prison behind. Instead, they walk out into the real world, carrying an internal, echoing vacancy inside their chest. And unconsciously, their nervous system begins actively hunting for the exact type of person who will exploit that vacancy. And this brings us directly to one of the most deadly relationship phenomena in modern psychology, the lock and key trap. In the vast, complex theatre of human relationships, narcissists and echoists do not just stumble upon each other by sheer coincidence or bad luck. They do not accidentally meet. They actively, magnetically pull each other across the crowded rooms of society. Their subconscious minds recognize the other instantly. They are the exact psychological equivalent of a lock and a key. They fit together with absolute, terrifying mathematical perfection. But it is a tragic bond that is engineered to end with one partner completely draining the life, identity, and soul out of the other. Think about the mechanics of this dynamic. A narcissist suffers from a pathological, insatiable hunger for external validation, praise, compliance, and absolute dominance. They have an internal void that requires them to be the absolute center of gravity in every single room they walk into. They need to be heard, seen, and worshipped. On the exact opposite end of the spectrum, an echoist suffers from a deeply ingrained subconscious fear of taking up any space at all. They are terrified of being noticed, terrified of being called too much, or branded as selfish. So what happens when they cross paths? The dynamic is instantaneous. The narcissist demands the entire stage, the microphone, and the applause. And the echoist gladly, with a sigh of relief, hands it over. They happily shrink into the dark background, convinced that compliance equals safety. The narcissist feels incredibly powerful, validated, and secure because they have found a partner who possesses no boundaries, someone who treats their desires as law and never says the word no. Concurrently, the echoist feels safe because they have found a partner who takes up all the attention in the room, allowing them to remain completely hidden, quiet, and invisible. But this safety is a devastating illusion. Over time, the echoist does not just support the narcissist. They morph into their emotional dumping ground. They absorb the toxicity, swallow their own mounting resentment, and slowly bleed their identity dry. They continue this until they wake up one day, look in the mirror, and realize they are no longer a person. They are just a tool used to prop up someone else's fragile, monstrous ego. You might be listening to these psychological breakdowns right now, sitting in your room or walking with your headphones on, and thinking to yourself, is this me? Am I describing my own life? Am I an echoist? Let us look at a simple, mundane, everyday scenario to find out. Let us call it the restaurant test. Imagine you are out for dinner on a Friday night with a group of friends, colleagues, or a romantic partner. The restaurant is lively, the menus are in hand, and the waiter walks over to your table, pulls out his notepad, and asks the standard question, "What would you like to order tonight?" Instantly, for a true echoist, a strange, suffocating wave of acute anxiety hits their chest. An echoist will never, comfortably or confidently, state their true preference. Even if their eyes are locked on the pasta and they have been craving it all day, they will not speak. Instead, they will wait. They will look around the table, watching what everyone else is ordering first. Why? Because their brain is flooded with unconscious fear. They are terrified that if they order something different, something unique, or something slightly more expensive, they will be viewed as a burden. They worry that their choice will inconvenience the waiter or make their friends judge them. So what do? They mask their anxiety with a polite, compliant smile, hide their true desire, and say, "Oh, whatever you guys are ordering is completely fine by me. I'll just have a tiny bite of yours. I don't really care about food anyway." They choose to literally starve their own physical and emotional preferences, just to guarantee the absolute convenience of the group. This deep-seated pattern does not stay at the dinner table. It bleeds into every single facet of their existence. If a complete stranger clumsily bumps into an echoist on a crowded sidewalk, the echoist is the one who automatically, distinctively jumps back and says, "Oh, I'm so sorry." If their romantic partner walks through the front door in a bad mood after a long day at work, the echoist does not think, "They had a bad day." No, they instantly assume it is entirely their fault. They feel a wave of panic, frantically racking their brain, running through the last 24 hours to figure out exactly how they messed up, what they said wrong, or how they failed to keep the peace. They live their lives trapped in a chronic, exhausting loop of preemptive apologies. They apologize for breathing, apologize for asking a question, apologize for existing. They have been systematically conditioned by past trauma to believe that their voice is an inherent inconvenience. Their opinions are an automatic conflict, and their very presence on this earth is something they must constantly apologize for. So, the ultimate question remains, how do you break out? How do you escape a psychological prison that has been built entirely from the bricks of your own silence? How do you stop being a mere shadow, a footnote, a secondary character in someone else's life story? The definitive cure for echoism begins with a brutal but profoundly liberating realization. Being kind, being empathetic, and being caring are undeniably beautiful human virtues. The world desperately needs empathy, but if you are actively destroying your own boundaries, erasing your preferences, and mutilating your own identity just to keep the people around you happy, you are not being nice. You are not being a saint. You are actively executing a survival tactic. You are silencing yourself out of terror. True kindness cannot exist without self-respect. Now, let us be completely honest with each other. I could stand here and give you the standard, superficial self-help advice. I could tell you to simply speak up, be confident, or go out tomorrow and set strict boundaries. But if you are a true echoist, we both know it does not work that way. It is never that simple. When your brain and your nervous system have spent 20, 30, or 40 years using silence as a literal shield to keep you safe from emotional destruction, saying the word no for the very first time will not feel empowering. It will not feel like a victory. It will feel absolutely terrifying. Your heart will hammer against your ribs. Your hands will uncontrollably shake. Your throat will tighten, and a wave of toxic guilt will try to choke the breath right out of you. You cannot cure decades of deeply engineered echoism overnight. It is a slow, methodical journey of rewiring your biology. And truth be told, you might never completely get rid of that quiet, inner urge to shrink when conflict arises. The ghost of your childhood home may always linger. Some days you will fail. You will find yourself saying yes to an exhausting favor when every single fiber of your being wanted to scream no. And I need you to understand, that is completely okay. Healing is not a straight line. So here is your path forward. Do not try to radically change your entire life, your career, or your relationships tomorrow morning. Do not throw yourself into the deep end of conflict. Instead, start small. Start with what clinical psychology calls micro-dosing discomfort. The next time a friend, a coworker, or a family member approaches you and asks for a favor that you do not have the time, energy, or desire to fulfill, I want you to pause. Do not instantly say yes. Do not construct an elaborate lie to protect their feelings. Do not apologize profusely, and do not over-explain your life. Instead, simply buy yourself time. I want you to read from this precise psychological script, word for word, with a calm, flat tone. I need to check my schedule. I'll get back to you later. By saying those few words, you are doing something revolutionary. You are retraining your overactive nervous system to tolerate the heavy, awkward silence between their request and your eventual response. You are microdosing the discomfort of not being instantly compliant. You are proving to your primitive brain, day by day, that disappointing someone else does not mean you are going to die. You are safe now. The childhood storm has passed. Remember this truth down to your very core. True, authentic kindness requires a spine, not a mask. Stop apologizing for taking up physical and emotional space in a world that you have an absolute birthright to belong to. Stepping out of the shadow is going to be incredibly, viscerally uncomfortable. Your mind will tell you to run back to the cave. Do it anyway. Thank you for spending your valuable time with us here at Humanus Psyche. The world is wide and your voice deserves to be heard. Keep observing, keep healing,